Morning News on YourIowa.com is brought to you by the Commission on U.S. Territories, striving for equal representation around the globe, and by Keep Iowa First, committed to keeping the Iowa caucuses the first in the nation contest in selecting the presidency of the United States. And now, here's your host, Brent Roske.
Happy Friday, everyone. It is Friday, January 15th, and I couldn't be more excited about this program than today. You know, I'm grateful to all our guests, but today, just an incredible guest. But I want to talk about Monday real quick first. On Monday, we have Dr. Franz Whitfield. He's going to be talking about finding inspiration in trying times. Dr. Whitfield is the minister at Mount Carmel Baptist Church, and very grateful to him joining us on, of course, Martin Luther King Day. And today is also focused on Martin Luther King Day. My guest today, you see the poster there up on the screen, directed MLK FBI, Oscar-nominated filmmaker, editor. I am a fan, Mr. Sam Pollard, and I'm going to bring him up here on the screen right now. There he is, all the way from New York City. Thank you for being here, sir.
My pleasure, Brent. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. And you just mentioned you actually have a Des Moines connection. You were here in the caucuses a while back.
I was there in 2008 for the caucus, the presidential caucus with Barack Obama and others. We were shooting the documentary, and I was sent down as one of the camera crews to document his particular, trials and tribulations at that caucus. Yep.
It was
a cold few days.
What's that?
It was a cold few days in Iowa.
Well, we got 6 inches of snow last night. Des Moines does cold really well. I actually worked on that campaign from Los Angeles, so that's great. You were to Des Moines before I was. So, well, welcome back virtually, sir. So I have to start this little chat saying that you are the editor of one of my favorite films, Mo Better Blues. It has art in the edit. You, sir, are an artist, and I always talk about the power of the editor. You just infuse so much jazz music into the visual of that. I was wondering if we could start the conversation with that. Like, what goes into an edit, particularly of a film like that?
Well, what goes into an edit is your obsession and dedication with the material that you're given and confronted with. And for Mo Better Blues, it was like, for me, I couldn't ask for anything more, because I'm a huge jazz fan. And all of a sudden, I'm asked to do a feature film about jazz musicians in the jazz world. So that was like I was in heaven, man. It was a great experience, and it was my first feature with Spike, the first one I did. So that was it was a real big joy.
That film caught me at a very impressionable time, and I remember watching it at the the beginning of the film, thinking there's no better life than to be a trumpet player in a jazz band. And then you find out, they have to earn money, and it's a challenge, and that was a similar story in a little different era was just told in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom on Netflix right now. But that interesting that balance between art and commerce, that was really the first time in my life I remember thinking about that in the storyline. I just thought it was fascinating.
Good.
So, but we are here to talk about MLK FBI. Now, folks who watch this program know that I've been involved in politics, either with my television show or working on campaigns, really specifically in the last 6 years. And this film, boy, you want to talk about the intersection of government and social justice and really life in general. This film does it, and there's so many things to talk about. And we showed the trailer yesterday that touches on some of it, but really, this movie encapsulates, it seems like J. Edgar Hoover's personal vendetta against Dr. King. Before we talk into about different things that happen in the film and that you tell. From the editor's perspective, I watched it. It's really an editor's piece. I mean, all the archiving that you folks did, and of course, going down to the source material, that is a monumental task. How did you start wrapping your arms around that?
Well, we brought on a fantastic archival producer, a person named Brian Becker, and we'd given him a list of material that we wanted. And I was familiar with a lot of that material because I had done so many other doc films about the civil rights struggle. So we knew we wanted the March in Washington. We knew we wanted Dr. King and his associates going to Birmingham, to Selma. We knew we wanted to find footage about the FBI. And the one thing I brought to the table was I had said to Brian and to the editor, Laura Tomaselli, who I thought did a fabulous job, was there's a lot of old movies that really sort of extol the virtues of the FBI, which we could use clips from. So I gave her a list of films like I Was a Communist for the FBI, Big Jim McClain with John Wayne, The FBI Story with Jimmy Stewart, and a series I had watched when I was a young man on ABC called The FBI with Efren Zimbalist Jr. So, there was hours and hours and hours of material that Laura and Brian and myself and our producer, Ben Haddeen, had to look at and go through. And that's part of the process when you're editing an archival documentary. You have to really dig into watching, researching and watching, and select the material that you think can help shape the narrative.
Washington Post in their rave review said that this film builds a world, and once we're in it, takes us on a potent and unforgettable emotional journey. As you're watching this film, and I'm not going to, reveal anything that the viewer should be seeing either in the theater or streaming on this release this week, but during the film, you notice a few minutes in that you're only watching film from that era. And was that something that you, when you set out to make it, you said we're going to make it this way, or was that something that you said we have this bounty, these riches of footage, let's go with this approach?
We initially said right from the beginning we were going to make the film the way you see it now. We were going to have the film basically be just all archival, except for those little recreations we did. And we were going to make sure that the people who spoke about that period and the movement and King and Hoover were all off camera. It was all something that we had pre-planned, and the only challenge that we had initially was that some of the funders were a little nervous about the idea of not seeing anybody on camera. So just to play it safe, we decided we would shoot all these people on camera. And if we got real heavy pushback, we would put them on camera. But luckily, no one really pushed back. And the only person we weren't able to get on camera because he wasn't able to do it was the former FBI director, James Comey. So we just did an audio interview with him.
And, he mentions in the film, I believe the quote was, he called this one of the most disgraceful moments in FBI history. So looking back on, J. Edgar Hoover's legacy, and again, the feelings of these individuals. J. Edgar Hoover was very popular at the time, and Dr. King sometimes wasn't in those days, and now a complete 180 reversal. There's a scene in the movie it's an interview clip that I just thought was so interesting. A good friend of mine, Iowa State Representative Akeo Abdul Samad, we just did a big interview, but we were just chatting socially, and he goes, I'm getting sick of people telling us that we're trying to move too fast for equality. And almost to the word, there's an interview in your film where, this, I don't know, woman in her 50s, this white Southern woman says, Dr. King, don't you think you're moving too fast toward equality? And it was just, he gives this look like he sits there and he goes, well, and he does an excellent politician's way of talking around that. But I'm wondering how that sits with you so many years later for us to be, so many people having the same conversation.
Well, that's one of the sad things about watching this film, the fact that many of the things that you hear in that film still resonates today. I mean, the other thing that she says that resonates with us, what resonated with me today, is when she says to Dr. King, don't you feel that your peaceful protests are causing the riots in the cities? And it made me think of the Black Lives Matter movement. And when we heard the same thing, aren't the Black Lives Matter folks causing all these riots in the cities? It's amazing, Brent, how you're watching a documentary that's over, looking at a period that's over 40 years ago, and how relevant it is today in American society. It's really not only amazing, but sad.
It is sad. I think if you played the audio and you told people it was recorded last week, they'd probably believe you. And viewers of this show, if you by chance missed it, we had Al Womble on, who's the chair of the Iowa Democrat Black Caucus, talking about the differences of what they faced in the protests this summer here in Des Moines and the treatment of the thugs at the Capitol last week. So again, that dichotomy, so much of it is talked about in this film, different ways that sadly people are treated just on the color of their skin, their backgrounds. And it's a sad statement. Let's talk about J. Edgar Hoover. In the film, it talks about Robert Kennedy giving, I guess, tacit approval for him to do these surveillances. And folks, just kind of in a broader sense, you get this from the trailer. This is a film about the FBI's basically clandestine monitoring of Martin Luther King. And it seems, just cut and dry. They were trying to figure out ways to discredit him and make him look bad. Where do you think that came from J. Edgar Hoover? What do you think his motivations were behind this in such nefarious tactics, really?
Well, think of it this way. Here's a man, Dr. Martin Luther King, who gives that phenomenal speech at the Lincoln, Memorial, the March on Washington, I Have a Dream. And after that speech, what's that quote that the FBI has? Dr. King is the most dangerous Negro in America. Why? Why did J. Edgar Hoover feel that way? Because all of a sudden, here was an African-American man standing up, in Washington, D.C., saying Black people don't want to be on the fringes of society anymore. They want to be in the mainstream. Now, J. Edgar Hoover grew up in an America where, Black people we were here, but we were in the shadows. We had our own self-contained communities. We couldn't integrate, sit on the bus, in the front of the bus, we had to sit on the back of the bus. We couldn't go into certain restaurants. We couldn't drink at water fountains that were designated white. There had to be colored water fountains. And all of a sudden, African Americans say they want to be a part of the American mainstream. Are these people crazy? And this one man is going to lead them to the promised land? No, 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 we can't have this. So what J. Edgar Hoover said, we got to stop this. I mean, in a way, Brent, he was speaking to an America that felt the same way. I mean, listen to those man on the street interviews in the documentary where the lady says, I don't like Dr. King because he's uppity. He's uppity. The other gentleman, the other person who's a man on the street interview says, Hoover says he's bad, but I think Dr. King is 10 times worse. They wanted us to stay in the shadows. So Hoover's obsession with saying Black people need to stay in their place, and knowing that Dr. King was one of our strongest leaders, made him feel we got to monitor this guy. There must be something that's fomenting this change. Is he being influenced by the Communist Party? Is he being influenced by this man that he's associated with, Stanley Levinson? So that's why he gave Bobby Kennedy gave him approval, because America was fanatical about anybody who they thought might be a communist back then. So he goes with his agents. They start surveilling Dr. King. And lo and behold, they learn as they're wiretapping King and his associates that he also has a very complicated personal life. So that changes who is in the FBI's direction. We can't get him connected to the Communist Party. Maybe we can discredit him by showing this Christian minister who's one of the reverends at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. He's not so upright and upstanding. He's got this very complicated, scandalous personal life. If we can bring that out, if we can feed that to the press, hopefully that can discredit and destroy him. But the thing to remember, Brent, quickly, in the 60s, the press didn't jump into people's personal lives like we do today.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk about, these tactics that you so successfully illustrate in the film. They had people in different cities, people in different areas. Oh, they would find out because they had, my understanding is they had informers working in Dr. King's office saying he's going to this city, he's going to that city, and tell folks what would happen.
Well, the FBI would, as one of our interviews, a former FBI agent, Chuck Knox, says, anytime they knew that Dr. King was heading to a certain city, the FBI would have all hands on deck. They would be at those hotels. They would bug the hotels. They would have, wiretap the rooms. They had agents everywhere. So that always makes me ask the question, Brent, if the FBI agents knew everything about Dr. King in every one of these cities, how come they were not aware of James Earl Ray? It's just sort of like mind-boggling that, if you're monitoring this very important civil rights leader, you don't know that there's people around him who want to assassinate him. Doesn't make sense to me.
What a interesting idea. James Earl Ray, obviously the person that was convicted of killing Dr. King, but there's a lot of doubt. I believe the King family doesn't even believe he was involved, or if he was involved, was coerced, is my understanding. But yeah, how could they be looking at, Dr. King, the people around him, and not see someone who, according to all reports, was in the shadows and not necessarily so much in the shadows. So yeah, that.
Well, when you heard Andy Young say, he didn't think James Earl Ray did it, and he must. I mean, I think there's somewhere, as you know, in this world, there's some secret tapes or video or something that really digs into who really assassinated Dr. King.
Interesting. And, okay, so you talk about tapes. Folks, a lot of this film is basically elegantly reporting on a tranche of documents that was released. And it's interesting, we're talking about FBI reporting on documents. So we talk about manufactured evidence. Obviously, if you look back, for instance, the Zapruder film, when it was shown in Life magazine, they published it, they took out some frames. There can be altering of evidence. I'm just wondering, that was a big decision to say, we're like, obviously these are FBI documents, and what's amazing about the internet, you go through and you can click on the 1,000-page documents, and I did start scrolling through. So again, you're archivist and all your folks' hard work. It's amazing, it's incredible. But do you give how much of that, because we've already established that the FBI had a mission to discredit someone, it doesn't mean then that they would be above creating, say, evidence or reporting on evidence. How much credence do you give these files based on, the evidence that we will be hearing in 2027?
I think you have to leave everything with an open question. And I know that even in our history books, how history has been given to us, it's all subjective in terms of how they want the history to be presented. The FBI wanted to present Dr. King in a certain way. So, it's all very subjective. You always have to challenge anytime somebody feeds you information. You got to say, well, what are they really saying? Is that really correct? What questions does it really raise? I mean, that to me is the thing that we all should learn about how we live in the world. That when people feed you information, you got to be able to kind of think about, well, what are they actually trying to say to us? How is it being manipulated? I mean, you can't. I've learned as in my years and on this planet that you can't take things at face value.
Wise words, sir. Thank you for that. But folks, when I watched the documentary, I had personally forgotten that Dr. King had won the Nobel Peace Prize back then. And it's a big deal now. It certainly was a big deal back then. A global audience, definitely putting him on a different stage. I mean, that must have just, and again, folks, you got to realize, like, if I was at a doctor's office once. I said, well, should I get this taken care of? He goes, well, Brent, if you walk into a barber and ask them if you should get a haircut, they're going to say yes. If you've got FBI agents whose job was to discredit someone, perhaps they would find or create something that would go toward discrediting them. And I can only imagine this gentleman won the Nobel Peace Prize, is lauded literally around the world, but you've got a group back here saying, no, we don't like that narrative. We're going to come up with something different. That probably put even more gasoline in the tank, as it were.
Well, absolutely did. I mean, here's a man who, as you just said, won the Nobel Peace Prize, but you got J. Edgar Hoover calling him the most notorious liar in the world. I mean, and it's interesting, as you said, back in the 60s, 64, J. Edgar Hoover was much more popular than Dr. King, because he saw Dr. King as a outlier, as a radical who was going to upset the apple cart. The American apple cart. It's sort of like him feeling like the Communist Party was, going to inflame African Americans to rise up, because from his perspective, there were no racial problems in America.
Yeah, right. Well, because he didn't have any problems.
That's right.
You're right. Folks, it's an incredible film. MLK FBI, IFC Films is releasing it. And just to kind of jump forward now, this is literally part of the release of this film right now. Just kind of nuts and bolts. How do you feel about the way motion pictures are now going to take a little bit of a left turn here? I've been talking to different filmmakers about obviously digital release, and conversations like this now are part of what probably will be happening ongoing. With you having some of the biggest film credits out there, again, Mo Better Blues. If you haven't seen it, folks, watch it. It's incredible. What do you feel about this transition?
It's both complicated and if you're into it, it can be engaging. I grew up like you, loving the idea of going to the movie theater, seeing movies. But I'll be honest with you, in the last 10, 12 years, I don't go to the movies like I used to, because now we have all these streaming platforms. So I can go into my living room and turn on my big TV and go to Hulu or Netflix or Amazon, or Disney, and watch a movie, or, Criterion Channel. Like last night, I watched an old movie from 1944 with Ray Milland called Ministry of Fear. I can watch these movies. So it would be nice to be able to sit in the theater again, because that feeling of going into a dark room, looking up at a big screen, the lights go down, the lights up front come up, and the movie comes up. It's like, wow. It's like, it's still a wonderful experience, hopefully. But, I was surprised to hear yesterday, I was talking to some people, that there are theaters around the country that are open. I don't know how many people they're letting in, but there are theaters. But here in New York, all our theaters are closed, So
one of the filmmakers we have on next week, the Tucci brothers, they've done big. LBJ is one of the films that they were involved in the financing of, and he was saying he lives down in Florida, and he gets to go to the movies quite a bit. And of course, obviously, folks, we encourage everyone to be safe and abide by protocols that you believe are safe, etc. But yeah, that it also going into a theater, honestly, the mystery of who's going to be sitting next to you, that shared experience, I 100% agree with you. There's going to the movies has always been a special thing to me.
Well, that idea. You sit in the movie theater, you go get your popcorn, you get your soda, you're sitting there eating the popcorn, and you try not to eat it all up before all the trailers are over.
Yep. Yeah. And hoping somebody tall doesn't sit right in front of you. Yep. Right. So, and folks are going to be able to there's streaming, and are there theatrical dates for this film as well, or what is this?
Today there are theatrical dates and streaming. I mean, you can find it. I mean, they've got over 100 places where they're showing it around the country. So there are theaters that people can go see it. And if you want to be safe and figure it out, go watch it. But you can also virtually stream it too.
Folks, it is a fascinating film. If you like history, if you like current events, I think as an American, you should watch this film. It is insightful, it is enlightening, and not always in happy ways. So thank you for making it. And what's next for legendary filmmaker Sam Pollard? What's next on your schedule?
Well, here's two things, Brent. The audience can know. On February 8th, on the PBS series American Experience, a documentary I did many years ago about the Tulsa race riots called Going Back to T-Town, will be re-shown on American Experience. And the next day, February 9th, on HBO, another documentary that I finished up just recently about Black visual artists like Romare Bearden and Carrie James Marshall and Amy Sherrill, who did the Michelle Obama painting. It's going to premiere on HBO, called Black Art in the Absence of Light.
Wow. Mr. Sam Pollard is an incredible voice. We're so grateful to have him on this program. Thank you, sir, all the way from New York City. I can't thank you enough. And viewers, again, tune in Monday. Dr. Franz Whitfield is going to talk to us about finding inspiration in trying times. Mr. Pollard, you have a lovely weekend, sir.
You too, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Folks, we'll see you Monday.